Hello friends, for today's video I'm going to be doing a non-spoiler review for the second season of Shadow and Bone. While this is not going to reveal anything that transpires within season 2, I am likely going to be mentioning character names, and I know some people can be very sensitive to hearing character names because it might reveal who does and does not make it from season 1. So if that's you, I just wanted to give that heads up. But jumping into it, I wanted to start with the plot. This is where season 1 shined, in my opinion, as far as changes and as an adaptation. Adaptations can be tricky because, of course, a lot of us fantasy fans, we care so much about our stories, and when we see changes, it can be very upsetting to us. Sometimes to a point where even if logically we recognize that those changes make sense and are what's best for this new audience of people that are going to be consuming the story, it can still irk us because in our minds we think, okay, but that's not how it is though. And I was nervous because they have combined the plot lines of the Six of Crows characters with the Shadow and Bone characters, and those never actually meet. Those timelines are not the same, and the show was going to be overlapping those timelines so that those characters could interact with one another. And they really surprised me with season 1 and how they were able to do this. However, they have done some things in season 2 that I wasn't really the biggest fan of. Most of the time, throughout most of the season, I was really on board. The reason I was on board is because it doesn't really alter the events that occur within the books themselves. It's just sort of a what-if scenario for things that came before. It's almost like this could have happened in their pasts, and even though the timelines don't overlap, so literally it couldn't have happened, it's still almost like, okay, well, if I just pretend that the timelines are closer together, then I can believe those things overlap, and it still won't alter what actually happens with those characters in their individual plot lines. However, some of the changes, what they have done is they've taken things that could not have happened at all, not even a timeline thing, it just literally couldn't ever have happened, and they are now changing things and making it so they're inventing new storylines completely that are not possible so that they can continue to have all of these characters with one another. And this is tough because I recognize that that is what is likely best for new viewers. This is likely what is best for people who don't have an attachment to the original story, who don't have an attachment to certain resolutions, and therefore it would make sense that they're not going to then cut certain characters out of the show and just continue on and have those stories end. It makes sense that they would have those stories continue so that you can continue to see those characters that new viewers have grown to love. But I was very ready for certain plot lines to be over, and to have new plot lines come into the picture that could not be was weirdly aggravating for me, to a point where I was enjoying the show so much until the final episode, and I was like, what the heck? Because I was so excited. That's another thing too, is I was so excited to see a certain thing unfold through the adaptation, and they've kind of delayed it. They haven't made it so it could never happen. They've just invented new things before that, and I don't know, in the future maybe they'll change that very thing as well, that resolution, but in the meantime, they've delayed it. And so I'm sitting there ready to see it, and then I'm not getting it, and I'm like, wait, what are they doing? And then I'm like, we can still get it though, we can still get it. And then the further the episode went, the further away from that thing I wanted we were getting, and I'm like, no, what the heck? And then I went to bed all pouty and childish, and I woke up the next day and thought, logically this makes sense, but it's still frustrating. And so I don't think it's necessarily a con. If I was to break this up into pros and cons, I don't really know where I would put it. I guess individually I would put this, or I should say personally, I would put this under a con, but logically I would put it under a pro. They still are finding ways to intertwine everyone's plot lines, and it's creative and it's interesting. My dog is upset about it too. It's creative and it's interesting, and I am curious to see what they're going to do next. The plot itself is somewhat tied to my thoughts on the pacing. So they always, in my opinion, did a good job of balancing all the different characters, because there are a lot of different characters that they have to bounce around between, and sometimes they would be separate from one another, sometimes they would be together, but I always was intrigued and interested and engaged with what was happening. I really wasn't bored at any point, but I do think that there are certain storylines that they could have taken more time to develop, and it could have been a little bit more of a across seasons sort of plot line that they put into this season. There were certain scenes I wasn't expecting to get this season, and then there are certain things that were completely taken out from the books that I'm almost guessing are going to transpire in potential future seasons based off of how everything concludes in this one. And so the pacing was a little strange, but again, it's more so as a book fan, the pacing was strange. I don't think the pacing really was strange for people who are new to this. And if you are somebody who hasn't read any of the books, I would love to know your thoughts. Were you captivated pretty much the entire time? Were you bored most of the time? What are your thoughts on the pacing? I always was interested. I wanted to go to the next episode immediately after one would end, but I also think that there were certain plot lines that I thought, oh, okay, I guess we're getting the rest of that plot right now. However, regardless of whether you are a book fan or not, I did appreciate that they would let certain scenes breathe. They would let certain characters have more time than I think I have seen in a lot of other adaptations. I wonder sometimes if people are afraid when they're making fantasy, specifically fantasy adaptations, if they're afraid that the viewers are going to get bored, if we're going to need to see a fight scene, or if we're going to need to see some cool special effects somewhere. Because when I was watching something like Witcher Blood Origin, it was almost unbelievable how quick the dialogue would happen, how quick character relationships would build, how quick everything would progress. And I kept thinking, do you think I'm bored? Give me a second to see these characters act like actual human beings. And I have felt similarly about various other different adaptations as well. Blood Origin is just too perfect of an example of something that moved too quickly. But I really appreciated the amount of time, again, that they would let things breathe. I think a perfect example is the character of Genya. I wasn't expecting them to give her so much screen time and to let her story play out as much as they did. And I was probably more moved by things that occurred with her than I was with any of our quote-unquote main characters. Genya, I thought, was fantastically done. I thought she was fantastically represented. I love that character in general, and I think that that was one of the highlights of this season. I also was really impressed with the way that the character of Nikolai, there's one particular scene where he's just kind of sitting and contemplating things, and eventually another character comes in and they talk with him, but they just sort of let this moment of silence happen where he's just, you're with him in that quiet moment. He's so rarely quiet, and so it's kind of showing you this deeper side of him in a very subtle way. And this, again, I'm like, Blood Origin could never. I was so disappointed because Blood Origin had a story within there that could have been good, and it was kind of ruined by being rushed. Whereas this one, there's so many stories that we have to get through, and they shockingly, even though they only had 8 episodes, they really let things take their time. Not always. There were certain plot lines that I think we could have taken more time with. There were certain plot lines that I think, once again, I touched on this earlier, but I think we could have had more time develop even across seasons. There's no guarantee that we're going to get a season 3, so I understand why they would want to deliver some of those juicier moments, and those moments are going to be the things that kind of hook people and make them want a season 3. So overall, I would say the pacing, mostly pros with a couple of things, once again, just like with plot, that were somewhat cons as well. I want to get to the thing, though, that I feel like is probably, for me, the biggest con, and that would be some of the dialogue and the way in which they didn't develop the Darkling, General Kirigan, as well as I would have liked. Kirigan, sadly for me, bordered on just being that mustache twirling villain, and every now and then he would have moments where it seemed like there was something more, but rather than me feeling like those moments showcase that there was something more, it just felt off. Because those moments, it's like, so is there more to this guy? Because I rarely see it, and I wish I saw it more. So much of it was just him being like, I'm a monster. Let me be your monster. I'm bad because I have to be. And at some point you're like, can he just have a little more nuance to him? There is a scene where something occurs to something he cares about. I don't want to say too much. And he's crying, and I'm like, there's Ben Barnes' acting. He doesn't get to do it very much, because most of the time he's just like, he's got his nose like a little bit up, and he's looking down at people in a kind of a condescending way, and just look at all these stupid Grisha that don't understand. Look at all these people that aren't Grisha. They're worthless and pathetic, and we should, whatever. You know what his shtick is here. But regardless, I think what didn't help is some of the dialogue they gave him. There was one particular moment where he is alone. No one's around. And he's like, so what will it be, Miss Starkov? And he has this dramatic, this, you know, like, will it be this option or this option? And he's just talking to himself, and then he walks all dramatically. And I'm like, what was that? What was that? None of us like the mustache twirling villain, but at least if you give us one that is so over the top and you just lean into it and you're like, we're not even going to bother making him nuanced. We're just going to be like, you know what? Evil. They're just evil. Go with it. I almost think that would have worked more than just like sprinkling in about one scene-ish in the season that makes me think there's more to him. I just really wish they had allowed his character to have more depth, and I think they could have easily done that if they had replaced some of the cheesy dialogue that they gave him, if they had replaced that with more meaningful moments or more meaningful dialogue. That said, a lot of the dialogue between the rest of the characters, it was hard for me to tell, and this is going to tie into the next point, which is a pro, which is the acting. It's hard for me to tell, and this is going to make me sound maybe not critical enough, but the acting is so good by some of these actors. Freddie Carter this season, to me, shined. His acting, I'm like, I need this guy to become a star. I need him to be known everywhere because, wow, was that amazing. Like, he needs to be in a movie where he plays Frank Sinatra, or he needs to be with Cillian Murphy where he plays brothers, and something where I'm just like, I need him to get a lot more roles and for him to be discovered by everyone because he's phenomenal. Anyway, my point that I was getting to is that some of the dialogue, I think I would hear it and I'm like, once again, kind of cheesy, but it would be delivered so well that I kind of bought it, you could say. I kind of was invested in it anyway. And Jesper, the actor that played Jesper in season 1, was probably the one that I was the most taken aback by. And this season, once again, phenomenal. But Freddie Carter, my goodness, Kaz, the actor that plays Kaz, I just was blown away by his range. I thought he was great. I thought when he would say something that he knew that's not how he really felt, but he just can't express himself, when he would say certain things and like tiny little ways in which his muscles and his face would move, you could feel his pain and not being able to say what he wants to say, or his fear of not having his gloves and touch and things like that. He portrayed that so well. He just was so good. And a lot of the other actors continued to impress me. I still am absolutely blown away by how perfect the casting is for this show. I thought the actor that they picked for Nikolai was fantastic. Wylan was, I'm like, that is literally that character. It's baffling. I've never seen a show that not only they found the look, but these actors, Nina, these actors bring these characters to life, and they really just, they did a great job. So I'm really pleased with the acting. I think the dialogue could be stronger. And how amazing would that be if we can get a little bit stronger dialogue for these really amazing actors? It's not that it was all weak. Some of it was good. Some of it was very quotable. Some of it I really liked. But again, some of it was a little maybe not as strong as I would like it to be. Those are the main things I wanted to touch on in this non-spoiler review. I will have a spoiler discussion with some of my friends. If you want to join the live discussion for that, I will have my Patreon linked. But if you happen to see this video after the fact, or if you can't make the live, it will go up here on this channel afterwards. It's just you won't be able to participate in the live chat function. But regardless, I would love to know your thoughts. If you do want to chat spoilers here in the comments, then just make sure you write spoilers and then enter a few times so that nobody who comes to the video is spoiled by the comments section. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.